If you find that a system service has stopped, it's usually really easy to go ahead and just restart that service. I showed you how to do that in the previous video. However, you may occasionally find that the service fails to start even when you try to start it manually. There are two main things that you should check because those two things can prevent a service from starting. So let's take a look. I'm going to go into the Service Control Manager and I'm going to double-click on the Network Location Service and I'm just picking the service at random. So here you can see the property sheet for the Network Location Awareness Service, and this particular service is currently running. Let's pretend for a moment that this service had stopped and that I can't get it started again. The first thing that I would recommend checking in a situation like that is the Log On tab, because services require permission in order to function as a part of the operating system. So you can see that this particular service is tied to an account called Network Service. And there's a password for that account. Now, this is part of Windows. I didn't create the Network Service account. I didn't enter the password. Windows did this automatically all by itself. So if a service is a part of the Windows operating system, then typically you'll never have to mess with the account or the password. Microsoft handles all of that for you. So why am I showing you this? Well, not all services are native to the Windows operating system. Sometimes when you install an application, there are services that go along with that application that get installed as a part of the application, and those services aren't managed by Microsoft. Windows doesn't really know anything about them. But just like a native service, those services that belong to that application require permissions in order to function, so oftentimes they're going to be tied to a service account. And if you happen to change the password that's associated with that service account, then the service may fail to start as a result of that password change. So that's when you would go into this screen right here and you would type a new password for whatever service account that service is using. As an alternative, you could configure the service to log in as the local system account. Now, logon problems for service used to be quite common. They're a lot less common than they used to be, but they do still happen. The other thing that I would recommend checking if you're having problems getting a service to start is the service dependencies. Because some services are more or less self-contained, they communicate directly with the Windows operating system and don't really depend on anything else. However, there are services that depend on other services in order to function. So if one of those dependency services has stopped, then services that depend on the dependency services will also stop. So let's take a look at what that looks like. You'll notice on the dialog box that's open that there's a tab called Dependencies. I'll go ahead and click on that tab now. And when I do, you can see that this particular service, the Network Location Awareness Service, has several dependencies. It depends on the DHCP client service, the Network Store Interface Service, the Remote Procedure Call Service, the TCP/IP Protocol Driver Service, and the Windows Event Log Service. So all of these services have to be running in order for the Network Location Awareness Service to start. So if you're having trouble starting the Network Location Awareness Service, then what you might do is take a look at this dependency list and then check and make sure that all of these dependency services are running. You may find that one of those has stopped. You could then start that dependency service and then you should be able to start the Network Location Awareness Service. And I'm just using the Network Location Awareness Service as an example. The same basic principle applies to every service on here. Now, just as a service may depend on other services, there can also be services that depend on the service that you're trying to start. In this case, the Network List Service, which you can see right here, depends on the Network Location Awareness Service. So if the Network Location Awareness Service stops, the Network List Service will also stop. And one thing that I want to point out is that dependencies can be hierarchical. Sometimes there are dependencies to dependencies. That's the reason why you see these plus icons next to all of these services. So if I were to click on these, we can see that the DHCP client, for example, depends on an ancillary function driver for WinSock and the Network Store Interface Service. So if, for example, the Network Store Interface Service were to stop, then the DHCP client would also malfunction, which would cause the Network Location Awareness Service to stop, and it would also cause the Network List Service to stop because the Network List Service is tied to the Network Location Awareness Service. So there is a complex relationship of interdependencies among some services, so that's something to be aware of as you try to troubleshoot service startup problems in Windows 10.